Hi. Thank you so much for having me here, and I'm very happy to be in conversation with Meena, who I have known for a while, and she's written for us. And I think the turning point in my encounter with her came when she wrote the poem on Hathras. And as a reporter, I had been to Hathras for 3 days, and I had seen all of that, and we had reported from there. But I think the poem that she wrote captured everything. And very powerful, and she was kind enough to let us use it in Outlook. And I thought that was fantastic and very disturbing, but very, very powerful. Meena wrote this book, and I'm not from South, so I don't know much about the poet, but she says in the introduction that you can also read it as a fresh text. And I think the Book of Desire, which is a translation, a feminist interventionist translation of Tiruvelluvar, okay, his Book of Desire, the third one, and she also talks about the two other, which are kind of moral codes for behavior, but she has focused on the third. And as women, I think it's very important to talk about sensuality, talk about female desire and the gaze also. She begins the book, and I took some notes while I was reading it, and she says that she places herself in the text as a woman from, from Tamil Nadu. And she also talks about this masculine insecurity, and how the woman is not present as a translator, as a commentator, and this whole absence of women. And hers is the first. I mean, obviously, this poetry has been translated many times, but I think from the women's point of view, it's very different. So I just wanted her to talk about your, positioning yourself in that text, and how did you do that, and why did you do that?
Can you hear me? Okay. So the Tirukural is a 2,000-year-old classic Tamil text. You find the Kural inside the buses. You find it on classroom, boards. Children recite it in primary school. It's literally everywhere. I mean, every political function, somebody uses it. The Tamil Nadu budget opens with something from the Kural. And also, the Tamil calendar is basically the year of birth of Thiruvalluvar. Just like, we date ourselves in the English calendar from Jesus Christ. So I think here it goes from the birth of Valluvar. So he's such a key and central figure. And then I felt it was very shameful that in these many years of the existence of this text, you had only, I'm only the second woman to translate the book. So, and then you realize also, I'm going to read a little bit of the first opening, because I felt that the Tamil woman exists inside the text. So the guy say, the guy or girl, so they say, Anangakul Aimail Kollo Kanangurai Madarkul Malum Yen Nenji. So my heart is tossed about. Is she the lusty she devil, a flamboyant peacock, lady of heavy earrings? And then again he says, or she says, once I never knew of that which is called death. Now I know it wages war with a woman's striking eyes. And so what you see here in this other one is very nice. Unnudar kovo udaindade nyatpinil nannarum utkumen peedu. My legendary veiler made foes tremble. Now it lies shattered, seeing her. So obviously, the kind of women is not somebody who is very coy, somebody who's very soft, someone who's just, where all the feminine, quote unquote, feminine graces come, This person is intimidating. This Tamil woman strikes fear. You look at her and he's thinking of death. And this is a person who has never thought of death before. And it makes the man, either or man or woman, vulnerable, be intimidated. And this is therefore a very strong woman at the heart of the text. But why doesn't this woman, who is the object of beauty, the object of desire, why doesn't she exist as a commentator for the text? Why are the principal 10 commentators of the text all masculine or men? Why doesn't this woman, forget commentary? Why is she not translating the text? So she exists as a lover inside the text. So what is her paratextual avatar? I thought to myself that, it's my job to talk about this. A Tamil woman is inside the book. She can't be trapped there. So you got to talk about her from the outside. So that's how it started.
I also wanted to ask that you said that you were claiming to interpret the Tamil woman, but it's a book for all women. I mean, I am reading it from Bihar and Delhi, and it seems like it's something that speaks to me. And you also speak, there's one line that you use. Does it eventually lead to love? You didn't want to ruin the interpretation in your feminist intervention, and yet you kind of talk about caste, all kinds of things. And you also change some of the words, like chastity. You use unwavering for that. And then you also use man and woman, not husband and wife. You use lovers where you couldn't. You're also looking at, touching upon homosexuality also. So it's very brave in terms of being a woman and writing about desire and, sexuality and sex and the section. So how did that happen, and how did you choose those words?
Thanks, Chinki. So for me, the idea of the book was to think of, on the one hand, the discourse around the book is a very limited to the Tamil universe. Therefore, and Valluvar was writing at a time when he was definitely projecting on somebody who could have been most likely Tamil. So it doesn't mean that it excludes anyone. I think it's a universal text from whatever it is. Because you see, there are no names named. There's no complexion given to the women. There's no feature in a specific way that she can be boxed. It doesn't say fair-skinned women are beautiful, dark-skinned women are beautiful. It doesn't say anything. I think the only reference to some kind of color was when he says, she has the complexion that reminds me of a home-cooked meal. In that sense, it just talks directly about intimacy instead of, fitting her in these, boxes. Therefore, it doesn't say, it goes on and on about shoulders, but I think they were fascinated about shoulders at that point of time. But, coming to this question of, one of the thing is, when you're a translator, it's not like you have to go and dismantle a lot of things. It's not like you have to go and create something. Sometimes removing the scaffolding, I think that just births what was originally there, but is seen in a fresh light. So the fact that it has always been commented upon or assumed that these are stories of, a married couple's love. These were much later interventions into the text. The original version doesn't necessarily speak about marriage. How did marriage exist 2,000 years ago? We don't know. It doesn't, for the 250 Kural, which means, let's say roughly about 1,500 words or something, it doesn't necessarily, except in one instance, refer to the man in terms of the word husband. So what are we thinking about? And what's the framework? And also, therefore this idea of, foisting the marital unit on two people who are only lovers in that unit, I felt that was an act of violence. I sometimes joke that Valluvar was writing for his side chick or she was writing for him. Let's allow the text to breathe. And the second thing I think for me was this question of chastity again. Because the Tirukural, when it came as a text, obviously it survived for a very long time. But around the time the Dravidian movement started making its inroads, they started reclaiming this text as a kind of, because it was a secular text, they started reclaiming this as a kind of Tamil identity, and it became a stand-in for so many things. And in many ways, the text was, very powerful. The beginning thing was it was secular. Everybody tried to claim it, but it sort of belonged to everybody. The Christians said it was their text. The Hindus said it was their text. The Buddhists said it was their text. And the Jains said it was their text because, it spoke about vegetarianism and all this. But at the heart of why I think in the late 40s and 50s, Periyar started holding these conferences around Tamil Nadu, around this one book. And they kind of saw that it was, against the dominant ideology that people are different by birth. So, the idea of a lot of the caste system, the idea of superiority or inferiority in birth, all of this comes from, the fourfold Varnashrama Dharma and then Sanatana Dharma and, the way castes are formed. But the Tirukural in that sense was always seen as a liberated text. It was always seen as a text which fundamentally says, Pirapokkum ella uyirkum sirapova seiduril vetrumayan, which is all people are the same in birth. And you are as good as how wonderfully you do what you do. So it doesn't mean that doing only something makes you special. Uh, and obviously at the forefront of, Tamil nationalism, Dravidian identity, self-respect, they were talking about all of this, but they never spoke about, and I think it was also because the discourse was so masculine, nobody spoke about how Valluvar's book was very opposed to Sanskritic, Brahmanical, hegemonic texts. So, the way, especially in the way in which I think the control of women, for me this was very fascinating, the way the control of women is spoken about in the Tirukural. So in the Manusmriti, you have things that say, learned men do not sit in the same room with their wife or daughter or mother because, they can corrupt them, or, the whole idea that women should be in the control of their father, their husband or their sons because, they cannot be independent. And on the other hand, the Tirukural says, Sirai kakkum kaappu evan seyyum magalir nirai kakkum kaape thalai, which means what is the point of building jails or prisons to control the women? I mean, women's control comes from their self-control. Only a woman can take care of herself. And in this way, her safety comes from her autonomy. A woman is safe only when she is free. And I felt that was like so the antithesis. And I felt like, people should talk about this more, especially Tamil uncles who are very willing to go with Periyar on everything, but who completely switch off when it comes to women's sexuality. I mean, just today I saw a little while ago a poster in Pondicherry where there's a female governor from the BJP. And they say, and it was a poster by a Periyarist organization, and they say, we don't like your makeup. I mean, like, you are Periyarist. You're not supposed to comment about a women's makeup. But, it doesn't matter how many Periyars come and go. And you have to constantly battle against this misogyny.
That is true. You also talk about, when you talk about this whole thing, a woman has to be entrusted with her own safety. And that's a very, very revolutionary thought even today. And then you also talk about this... If a situation becomes incompatible, like a marriage, for instance, and it's almost like living with a snake in the same house, and that's what you allude to. And this is a very, very liberating kind of text. And, in your ways that you kind of took it from the translators and kind of made it your own, and kind of made that text, I mean, we can also own the same text. Not from here, but from elsewhere. So it's a very brave thing to do that. I mean, were you thinking, how would you do that? How would you be cast? Because, feminism itself has become a very complex thing now. With a lot of women, with the current political, social, whatever climate, you would know better. So yeah, how did you kind of decide to touch an ancient text and then kind of, yeah.
So, the thing is, for me, there are things about this text that really spoke to me, which made me feel that, I'm going to read a little bit, Chinki, if I have your permission. There are some things that, keep coming to me. So, the way this woman in the book chides herself, she says, give up shame or give up desire, good heart. I cannot suffer both of them. Or, just give me a second. There's this entire section where she starts berating herself. She says, having seen how his heart is in love with him, dear heart, whose are you when you don't get along with me? There's this another place where she addresses her girlfriend. And she says, I want to make him wait, but, I'm so shameless and sex is so difficult to put away from, so I'm running into his arms. So I felt in all of these senses that this book was, here she goes on, says, my desire is an endless sea. There is no raft to swim across safely. I can read the Tamil as well because I think Malayalis, people in Kerala share shared language. Kama kadal mannum unde adinindum yema punai mannum il. So there is no shore and there is no way to also swim across it. I felt it was so powerful to talk about sexuality in this way, and it kind of like resonated so much because we are so, in a sense, oppressed, right? And especially when you're a poet, you're constantly policed. And everything that you write is seen as something that you write from autobiography. And again, we live in a world where if you talk about sexuality, that's the day you sign the death warrant on talking about politics. Because, immediately if you're a politically powerful person, people are going to bring all your sex stories to light. So you can only have one of the two. You can live a very, private life, and then you can talk about politics, or you can live a very flamboyant sexual life and shut up on politics. As a woman, you can never have both of them.
No, I mean, that's what is assumed. And I also wanted to now go a little bit beyond the book also to talk about the experience of a woman writer. In terms of we face a lot of patriarchy, misogyny, sexism on a daily basis, right? And inherently we're not supposed to be political because we are supposed to only write about entertainment and things like that. I mean, that's the usual in journalism for us. And some ground has been broken, but not all. And especially when you're supposed to talk about love, but as a lament or something, but not really about sex, which is very intertwined. And here in this book, actually, you really translate it and kind of. So I just wanted to also talk about, your experience with publishing, with being so outspoken, with being so powerfully, yourself, you've talked about your own experience with domestic violence. You've been pretty much open about everything. So how did you get there, and how did you become so political? And is that inherent in being a woman? Because when you're born a woman, you're anyways political in that sense, no?
No. I don't think courage is inherent in any of us at any point in time. At some point, I was fascinated with the tigers. Because, growing up in the late 80s, when the IPKF was in Tamil and killing a lot of Tamil people, raping women and all, the tigers kind of started, I think, at that time, recruiting women into their ranks, and it became huge, And one of those things that, and everybody would say, right now, everyone says this for Hamas, they say for Israel, they say, oh, but you have to be non-violent. Why do you take up weapons? Oh, why can't you do this peacefully? Why don't you struggle peacefully? So the entire thing was this peace discourse, which never looked at state terrorism. So you're like, oh, you have demands. These are legitimate demands. You have to choose peace. And I think at some point, what the tigers did was to talk about, it's my enemy who decides the weapon I use. If I'm taking up arms today, it's because you're forcing me into taking up arms. I'm not taking up arms because, I have a death fetish. And I think that kind of resonated with me. Obviously, that's a very extreme case scenario for people who are facing decimation, facing genocide, facing erasure. But I think it's very true for women as well. I'm very sure that we are who we are because of what we encounter. We're not okay, I get up one day and I'm going to be provocative. We become provocative because when we talk in the normal language, nobody responds. The way people respond to women making political points or any point is through silence. They just ignore you. So the only way you get attention is by being quote unquote provocative. And then again, in terms of, what goes for shamelessness, what goes for courage, is that you become fearless because that's the only way they try to, silence you. And I remember my own father was, and I think a very gentle but a very patriarchal person. And he used to be the kind of, and I grew up in a household where I wore my first pair of jeans at 25 for the only reason that I was going to the US and it would be cold there. I grew up with this kind of, really typical Tamil oppressive household. But then, when people started criticizing my poetry and my personality or whatever, people were like, but she shows her cleavage and that's why she's famous. And I was crying for days because it takes so much pain to get where you are, and people don't see anything beyond one photo somewhere. And then I was going and crying to my father, this basically the most patriarchal person who decided what I should wear. And my father said to me, oh, what a daughter I have. I'm so ashamed of you. If somebody says that you are becoming famous by showing your cleavage, you should tell them, I have something to show, I'm showing it.
That's very...
So, if you don't have it, please podi or poda, that was... And I realized that my own parents, people I saw as being they were hardened. They were hardened because of the criticism coming my way. And when I saw that, they could switch sides.
Yeah.
When, I mean, obviously everyone switches sides when it comes to their daughter. Like, nobody is supposed to, like, and I remember my father at some other point, like, people were, I was in a bad, violent relationship, and people were saying all kinds of things. And my father, I remember very clearly saying, okay, if a man can have, like, 4 partners, my daughter is no less than you, she can have 40 partners. And this again, like, this was really my father. And I'm like, I mean, this comes from early Periyar as well. So Periyar in the 1930s is saying, in our society, we allow men to have 3 wives. Yeah. But why can't women have 4 concubines? And I'm like, I'm saying all of this looks outrageous, but unless you start talking this language of outrage, you cannot negotiate. I mean, it's the same like taking up arms. Like, people take up arms so that we come to a table and we talk. So unless, I mean, that's where I think the outrage comes from, or, being outrageous comes from, just to get to the point of dialogue.
And you also say in your intro that, the 2 things that stick to me is, one, that I invite you all to fall in love, and then you also say weaponize your words. So I just wanted to ask you about weaponizing words, and how do you do that, and why is it important? And as a translator, how do you kind of take a text and then weaponize, or maybe some instances where you've kind of done that? I mean, I know that chastity and unwavering is one example, but otherwise, that's also kind of resistance and protest in a way to, yeah.
I'm going to do some out of syllabus thing. So, when we talk about weaponization, or, with words, obviously chastity is the common example. I've talked about it in a lot of places. But what I did as a kind of thought experiment was to see, like, today white means hegemony, right? Like, whiteness and all. And I went back to the Tamil lexicon and was looking at what is the word. I mean, I'm going to read this poem. So everything that's said here is not my imagination. This is like from the actual Madras University lexicon, published in 1956, but which traces the history of the language since the first extant Tamil grammars. I dig into Tamil looking for whiteness, the color of conch shells, a name for Venus, and everyone's easy guess, emptiness. A parasite, it rode on cleanliness and purity, latched on to brightness and brilliance, light and lustre. It was also unspeakable shame speaking for itself, a woman's love sickness that left her skin pale, the pallor of illness, something superficial, never profound. In poetry, a discordant note or sound. In people, the ignorant, the guileless, the one lacking anyone. Like veneration, violence followed white everywhere. Velu meaning white, as in give someone a good thrashing. And for me, like, this is the whole thing, right? Like, words in their particular languages. I mean, like, look at the word. If white meant somebody who was, easily gullible, or, somebody who didn't, who could be very naive, or it was all of this. But today it's like, just carries authority. It carries, like, superiority. Everything has changed. And therefore, I think that language is very powerful, because what if we told people that this is perhaps also what it meant? What if we just stopped acknowledging that that's hegemonic? But, okay, like, fair skin is so highly rated, right, in our country. But what if we told people that, if you were that fair-skinned, it possibly was reflecting illness, like, okay, you were anemic or something, but it was not necessarily like a superb trait, So, I mean, and it's important, because when we say that our language gives the space, it means that our society held the space. I mean, language doesn't exist without relation to society. So, and this is where I think, I also do this work as a translator. So.
And the other thing also, in the modern love scenario, you also kind of mentioned gaslighting and all those kinds of things also, that, I mean, there were problems in the text as well, like him berating prostitution and things like that. So I just wanted to also look at the, the timelessness also in a way, and also contemporizing what you have read from 2000 years ago. And you are talking about these new terms. I mean, the Oxford Dictionary now just admitted situationship and all these words. And clearly in this book, there is some of that going on. So how did you, while translating, how did you kind of come to terms with that, or how did you kind of vanquish that, smash it, or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, one of the earliest critics of the Tirukural was Periyar, and one of his greatest supporters in later years was Periyar. So what Periyar does is very clear. He never goes to the third section. He remains in the first section on morality and the second one on materialism. And he questions out. And part of materialism is a little bit like, I think the closest text, these are not influenced or connected, the closest text would be Chanakya's Arthashastra, right? And so these are basically meant for the king and administration. And you say, okay, there's a section on prostitution, but actually what you call prostitution comes right after spies. So, and it's very interesting if you look at the co-location of these texts, because just as spies were used to extract information, it's very possible that women were used in some way to also trap men. And so I believe that it was part of statecraft and not necessarily answerable for other kinds of judgment. So obviously, and one of the things that Periyar says is, if Valluvar was a man, was a woman, would he ever write these questions?
Exactly, yeah.
And I think it's so right. Like, if he was a woman, would he write this kind of stuff? And that's why I think my translation really limits itself to the last 25 chapters on love. And I think my biggest fear was not for me. I mean, I can talk my way out of every situation. My biggest fear was for Valluvar. I mean, what if I did this translation and Gen Z cancelled him? What if they came and said, this guy is toxic? Or this girl is toxic, he's gaslighting? Because there are like all this, there are all these places where they're fighting with each other.
Yeah, like she's complaining.
And there's something that says, Oodal, Unardal, Punardal, Ivai Moondrum, Kamam, Kudiyar, Petrapayan, which means quarrel, reconcile, make love. These three, the lovers' rewards. And we were like, oh my God, this guy was totally manipulating her. Once I remember I've been with my partner for the last 12 years. So I used to say, hey, I'm fighting with you because, this is just a lover's quarrel. And he was like, Meena, if you have to get laid, we don't have to fight. There are other ways to get there. Obviously, my worry was like, what if Gen Z says, oh, this guy was manipulating, he was gaslighting, But it's also the women. I think the entire chapters on being possessive, they're all in a woman's voice, right?
Yeah.
So this guy is trying to sneeze, and then, can I read that? Those are hilarious.
Yeah, please do, yeah.
I'm just going to take a little break and read how lovers' quarrel looked all those years ago, and some of you may relate.
I think there was one in the Solace of Dreams. That was very interesting, but up to you. I even marked some of it.
Okay. Kotuppu Sudinum Kayum Urthiyai Kaatiye Sudinir Endru. I wear flowers fresh off trees. She burns. You wear this only to show off to some woman. Yarinum Kadalam Endrena. Udinal Yarinum Endru. When I said I loved her more than anyone else, she sulked, asking, then whom? Imai Pirappil Piriyalam Endrena. Kannire neer kondanal. I said, in this birth, we are inseparable. Tears welled up in her eyes. Ullinen endre, matren marandir endrennai pullal punatta kanal. I remembered you, I said. So that means you had forgotten me, she cried and pulled herself away from embracing me. I sneezed, she blessed. Then erasing her blessing, she wept. Which woman now thought of you, causing your sneeze? I suppressed my sneeze. She cried, are you hiding from me that your woman is thinking of you? I pacify her. She burns. Is this how you do it with the others as well? I long for her. I gaze at her. She burns. Who is that woman on your mind as you take in every part of me?
That is true. You want to, there was two paragraphs that I found very interesting, and maybe you could read it out, but I think the Tamil side is this side. But that's...
Oh, these are my favorites as well. I think one of those things and which I think that men possibly in today's day and age should know is that girls share everything. So I go to another city and a girl shows me her DM and says, hey, this guy who thinks he was interested in you, he has been sliding into my DMs. I mean, women talk everything, and sometimes we send our text by committee, so 3 or 4 of us are waiting the message that should be sent. All your messages are screenshotted for, blow by blow coverage among the girls. And this is very interesting because here there's an actual reference to the girl, the woman, or addressing her girlfriend. Yeah. And so she says, Oodarkan sendren man thodi, adu maranda koodarkan sendrathu en nenju. So what it means is, petulant, I went to pick a fight, dear girlfriend, but my heart forgot that and ran after him for sex. I mean,
it does happen mostly.
So, yeah. So, you want me to read the other one?
The second one also is quite interesting, actually.
I'm wearing a lot of eye makeup right now to see. எழுதங்கால் கோல் காணா கண்ணேன் கோல் கொண்கண் பழிகானேன் கண்ணிடத்து. So what she says is, like eyes that cannot see the coal liner when it defines them, I do not see my lover's fault when he's in front of me. So yeah, it's clearly a situationship, right?
Totally. And also, one of the last few questions was that, now there's a whole insistence on this Manuwadi situation and, a lot of these comments by people in power about women and how they should be behaving, how they should not be behaving. If you just look around, and a lot of the social media has also become really toxic places for women, body shaming, age shaming, all kinds of things are happening again. I mean, I don't know. I mean, people talk about all this liberation, but it's very difficult. I mean, we have achieved some of it, but not a lot of it. So I just also wanted to ask you, as a translator, translation does a fantastic job of getting these kinds of texts also as resistance to that text, which is from our side of the world. But is this also a very, very political book in ways that can be conceived, in those, the frameworks maybe? If you can talk about that a bit. I mean, you do talk about it in your introduction, about it being political.
Yeah, Chinki, part of, in some ways I think I translated the book in order to write that introduction. So that, okay, I have a sample, I have things to say, please listen. So one of my things, recently we have been hearing so much about Hindi imposition and all of that, but also largely, a certain cultural hegemony that wants to, bring back casteism, bring back the worst aspects of patriarchy into a society.
And popular culture, like films like Animal and, even popular culture for that matter, like films like Animal.
Referencing Animal. So, in some way you are either commodifying it or exoticizing it or trying to also go into this vague territory where women are wanting it or they find it attractive. I mean, like trauma victims are going to find anything attractive. So, so what I wanted to actually do was to talk about this kind of, a colonial incursion doesn't necessarily have to be coded by race. It doesn't only mean that, okay, the British were colonialists or, the Dutch were colonialists or the French were colonialists. I think we have to shift our definition and try to see what it, colonialism mean in the Tamil context. What does it mean when, Aryan hegemony or Sanskritic hegemony starts making its inroad into Tamil? How does the language change and how do these social modes change? Because at some point things start changing and, you have to start. And one of the reasons for also doing that is because, when you say the word Sanatan Dharma, you mean that which has never changed. So when you take it to the people, if you tell them, okay, this started around only the 6th century, so it is only a history of 1400 years, then it means it's something you can defeat. It's not something that is eternal. And therefore, I think placing it in some kind of literary historical context means that you can show, okay, this is temporary, this is not meant to be forever. I believe in some ways, even a radical text can do that job for you. So.
And I also wanted to say that even the titles of the chapters, and some of them I wrote down, it's very interesting. Like the first one is Being in Love, The Lament of Memory, and the last one is very interesting, is about the delights of sulking. You have 3 chapters, sulking, nuances of sulking, and the subtleties of sulking, and the delights of sulking, and then Evening Melancholia, Reading the Signs, which is again very interesting. Berating the Heart, and so even the way that chapters have been divided, and obviously there are 250 Kurals that you have translated, and you do write in your intro that your father made you memorize it, and that's how you. I mean, that was it, you said this book or the translation was conceived in a Tamil universe. I just wanted to ask you, what does that mean, and how is that universe different from a woman's universe in a global thing?
So, I mean, like, obviously, I want to be a woman of everywhere, but in some ways, you are rooted to your language. So, I don't necessarily think it's a better thing or a superior thing or anything, but it's still, in some ways, I mean, like, you speak or think or, relate. I mean, my partner is Belgian French, so obviously, I have made the leap into, loving strangers, so to say. And it's a very, I think in that context, it's a very different kind of political negotiation, because you can still love, but you can love at an arm's distance. And I think there's something about sharing a language that brings you to a level of both vulnerability and intimacy that I'm not sure I'm open at all times in my life. But yeah, is it a Tamil universe? In many ways, the book itself is, thought about that. But this universe does have some universality, which I think speaks to women everywhere. And which is, again, women's experience. I wouldn't necessarily negate the two. I think there's a lot in common going on. In terms of my father, I mean, like, so my father's biggest regret was not... So I went to a Kendriya Vidyalaya, which means I ended up learning Hindi. Unlike, my father was a Tamil scholar, so it was his biggest regret that I was not getting, into the Tamil. And I think the fact that I didn't learn Tamil made me totally or absolutely immersed into the language to kind of make up for it. And so he felt that I had to, and he's also somebody who is a classic Tamil scholar, so he thinks all the great works were written up to the 6th century. After that, he doesn't engage. So, and it's quite, so I kind of learned it because I thought this was, I tried to, in many ways, make up to my parents, to make sure I was loved, I think. They greatly loved me, but I still felt I had failings. And I think with my mother, I failed very badly because she's a math professor. And yesterday, for instance, I was asking her some question. She was absolutely appalled by how stupid I was. So I could never make up to her. I can't write anything in math. But to my father, I kind of tried to, make up by getting into and reading the Quran and trying to have conversations with him about it. But there's a very strange reason why the book is dedicated to him. It's because I went and asked every single Tamil man who has been in love with me. And believe me, like, everybody wants to be in my life, but nobody wants to publicly acknowledge this. They were like, the day you write about morality or materialism, the first 2 sections you can dedicate the book to me. This book, I don't want to do anything with it. So I thought, okay, the only Tamil man who would be a victim of this is my father. So I ended up dedicating this book to him. So so that was the background. But I forgot your question in going into all this. Was there a question? No, I mean, like, I think the text itself doesn't, even contain the word Tamil, right? Like, it's universal. It doesn't have any, I mean, it might have some ecological things or environmental things that ground it. It might have many emotional states that ground it to a Tamil conception, like, talking about the night as this period where parting is so difficult, or talking about, some of these expressions like, how evening is the killer. So I think this kind of the idea of the time of day representing something, or the idea of a space representing something, I think these are part of the Tamil emotional and literary landscapes. But coming to this question of how does the Tamil, I mean, the thing is, it's as much a book that talks about Tamil as much as it also rebels against Tamil, because you still live in a culture that's very, what do I call, is very Uncle G centered, right? So uncles will simp you at some times, but after this mandatory simping, I think there's always like, but she's a young and, an upstart, or, she's getting attention because she's a woman. I mean, this is the coda of all, the way in which you're perceived. So you have to be a certain, Tamil uncle of a certain age in order to comment about a book like this. So in many ways, from the outside, it looks like I'm reclaiming Tamil pride, identity, whatever. But from the inside, it's like, I don't think any Tamil uncle likes what I'm doing. You know, they're like, why is she doing what she's doing? So obviously, I think that clash always exists.
I don't know if this works. Okay, yeah. So basically, we just wanted to now open it up for questions. If anybody has a question for Meena, please go ahead and ask.
Am I audible? Hi, ma'am. Happy to see you in Kerala because my name is Ajmal and I am doing English Literature Master Degree in Bardiyar University, Coimbatore. And the thing is that, as you mentioned, even in Sangam literature, we come to know that how women are given more important, how they are treated as goddess, even in Indian culture, especially when it comes to Tamil culture. Even in Kannagi, how she was given much important, and being much familiar with Tirukural, even I understand that the love, it is specifically, it is given as an umbrella term for the women, even by the Tirukural, where you will come across in Purananuru, where women will be, like she will be waiting for the Talaivan to come to her. She will be in support of her girlfriend, where she will always says that, I'm waiting. Even Udal, I'm not much good in Tamil. Udal Varundadal, we say it in Tamil, where the Talaivi is waiting for the Talaivan in order to get him back after a long journey, where she suffered for his love, and she compares that with the nature. Even with the moon, she requests the moon. Even the crow is mentioned in that, where she asks the crow to bring back the Talaivan to me so that I can have my companionship with all this. But when it comes to 21st century, do you think that still it is women who is suffering or who is in a thirst for love? Because as a man, I say that even men are in thirst of women's love. Do you agree with this? Because in the history, in culture, in Sangam literature, love, the umbrella term love, specifically it portrays women's love, which means that women is a person who always long for the male love. But in today's scenario, I don't agree with that completely, because I say that men also long for the true love which they need from their partner, which is from the women. Men understand women much better than their own fellow female partners. Do you agree with that?
No, I didn't get your second question. What is the second question? Men?
No, I say that in current scenario, it is not only women who is always longing for the pure love or the true love. It is even men. There are men who longs for the pure love from their partners. So, time being in this scenario, I say that love can be used as a term which is quite common for both the gender.
No, I think it's always been a common for both the genders, even though I think even Thiruvalluvar, I think, centralizes women's feelings much more, gives much more space to it. But I'll just read one or two chorals, because here he says, what is the point of my reaching her? What is the point of my having reached her? What is the point of my becoming one with her when she is shattered by heartbreak? So, it's not only that she is waiting, but he is also worried about at what state is she going to be when I go to her. So I believe that, it's not a numbers game, like, okay, Valluvar spoke 8 about women and only 2 about men. We can't quantify, but I do think that, yeah, I do think, in today's age, I don't know, I can only speak from my experience. Do men also long for women? Yes, but are they linguistically competent enough to write that instead of using Chat GPT? That I don't know. They have the feels. Dudes have the same feels, but
yeah, I say that both. All the genders. Even we have much new genders which has arisen.
Yeah.
So I say that everyone long for
yes,
love.
Everyone has the same feelings. Yes.
So it depends according to their traumas, what they have undergone from the childhood in their life. So to add this, so it is both men as well as women who is longing for true love.
Yes, it's true. I think everyone wants love. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else has a question?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Hi, good evening, Meena and Ms. Chinki. I am Joseph, and my question is a bit different. When all institutions try to control women, how can they liberate themselves being in the institutions?
I think this is, I mean, like sometimes you have to dismantle some institutions, you know, you have to dismantle the caste system, you have to dismantle patriarchy, you have to smash some structures. You have to sometimes dismantle even Tamil identity if it becomes oppressive. I'll be the first person to speak against it if I think that it stands only for the oppression of women. So I mean, like and I think a women's position in this sense is quite. You are very much at the forefront of making sure that you democratize an institution, or you. Oh, you didn't hear me. Oh, okay. So yeah. So the thing is, when you're a woman, you're in this very vulnerable situation where institutions are used to oppress you, or eventually, even if they were considered to be, you know, like some kind of egalitarian framework, finally patriarchy tries to seize control of it. So I think language, for instance, is an egalitarian structure, but over time, patriarchy takes over so many parts of it that. Hi. I hope this is not some way of silencing. So the thing is, either you democratize an institution, or you dismantle this institution if it's beyond redemption.
You heard her? Okay, I can answer your question. You asked about dismantling institutions. So, you know, I became the editor of Outlook 2.5 years ago. Younger for being an editor at my age, I'm not young. And also there were no women editors before. And I think that was newsrooms are very, very male dominated in terms of how they look at news. Like, you know, if you go to a rally, they'll cover a rally. They will not look at women's issues. They're obsessed with events, you know, this army type stuff. You know, that's why defense, for instance, gets a lot of coverage, whereas health and education do not get coverage. And when I joined, I think it was really bad. You know, I was trolled by people. People even said things like, I'll translate it for you. What problem do you have with men? You know, things like that. Otherwise, they would never say those things to a male editor, you know. So women, you know, when they are in these kinds of roles, you know, they're either expected to nurture men, which is the role that has been given to us, and we have not really questioned it, or they are supposed to kind of become like men in terms of, having the same kind of a powerful position. And they behave like men. Neither of this is okay. I mean, why should I be hand-holding people, and why is it expected out of me? So I think it takes a lot of time to break structures, and a lot of heartbreak, and then there's a lot of loneliness over there. But I think if I could do it, I think I'm sure many people can, and many people have done it. And I think Meena's book, for that matter, is a revolutionary book in terms of breaking that, the gaze of desire, which we always look at. You know, we always assume that men can have desire, but women can't have desire. And that's very interesting in current times when women's freedom and everything is at stake again. And I use the word again in a very... So yeah, I hope... anyone else has a question?
Hello. I was just interested in the context that this translation is coming into, because it's published in the UK with Gali Beggar Press. It's published here in India. And I just wonder if you had any thoughts about what this translation is doing in UK, perhaps, versus India. Do you have a sense of it, you know, maybe having different kinds of reception as you've lived in different places? So
I think this is very. I haven't given it that much thought, you know, in terms of the two countries and what the book does and what it speaks to. For instance, when I wrote on domestic violence, I think the book was doing very different things, and I think after a point I got so saturated about talking about domestic violence to Western European audiences, because I was basically checking this stereotype of brown women who needed rescuing. And I refused to do any events in India even before I tried an event, because I was checking this box that this was my mistake. The fact that you write about it, the fact that, at the end of the day, people would be like, did you hastily get into marriage? Or do you regret doing it? And it became like, you know, a kind of, I knew this would be the circus in India. But then I realized that, you know, in the West, I would fit into a box that I didn't want to fit into. So I have not thought about the Tirukulan in this way. But now that I'm the mother of two little children who happen to be biracial, and one day my kids came and said to me, they were, playing in the playground, and they said, only white people are people. I mean, both of them can moderately pass off as white, or that's what they think of themselves. And they said, so I went to my partner, Cedric, and I said, see, this is your problem, you have to handle this. This is not my job to educate them. I think they were about 3 and 5 at the time. And I was shocked. I mean, like, they were growing up in India, so where did they come up with this idea? And so my partner tries to say, look at mama, mama gives you food, mama was feeding you, mama takes care of you, mama loves you, and mama is brown, so, mama is also like, and then they were like just looking at each other, and then my eldest son turns to my partner and says, let's make mama white. I mean, his entire idea that, A, white people are people, only white people are people, and B, if she's so human, let us make her white. And I think in so many ways, when you operate or you try to work in like another context, it is in some ways, I mean, it's all of this political thing, it's decolonial, it's feminist, but also in some ways it's the need to be recognized as human, right? The need to say that, we also have culture. The need to say that, everyone speaks about, let's say, okay, French or Latin or Greek or, classical literature, to say, oh, we also have classical literature. And in so many ways, I don't know if it's communicated, because I think the book came around COVID or just as COVID was ending, so I have not met audiences. But in one way to be seen as human, and another to also take up space to say that, yours is not the only language, and also, to in some ways to say, well, we can do English too. So I think it is all of this.
I was just saying that to also speak to the Western audience, saying that we have desire too. I mean, they've always looked at us as people who are not really, I mean, I just wanted to say something. Also look at what's happening in Gaza, for instance. So that's there. Any other questions?
Hi. So since you're a translator and also bilingual, you've previously mentioned how it's a little more easier to talk about sex, sexuality, desire in English than in your mother tongue. So I'm just curious to know, which is your language of thought? Like, in which language do you usually think before conceiving something to write about? In which language do you think, or in which language you get angry or happy, or in which language do you emote and think?
I mean, I think the most intense emotions are like in a state beyond language, which is why they disrupt you, right? I mean, once you come to language, you already are coming to a structure where you can reason. Like once you can come to, the level, obviously I think I cry a lot in Tamil, and I think it's possibly your mother tongue that's closest to you. But I also think any language means that you're less to your confused mess of emotions. I mean, in heartbreak and all, like, how much do you really, I don't know. I think you think in Tamil. I would like to think like that, but I don't know if thoughts exist in language. I'm not sure. I think language exists when you have to talk to somebody, write down something. So I think it's a state of mind, possibly Tamil. But as much as, I'm, bilingual or trilingual or whatever you call it, I still think that my knee-jerk responses are Tamil. So, and I think possibly my cultural responses would be Indian in that sense, and then it would go into being whatever is English, quote unquote. So, yeah.
Anyone else has a question or? Yeah, okay. Well, thank you so much, Meena, for writing. Oh, somebody has a question? I didn't see. Anyway. Oh, so this is my only thing that, we just published a whole 100 pages on poetry, protest poetry. And I just wanted to also say that I'm very happy that there are poems that we can read. And I think in these times and these kinds of polarization and all of that we are facing, I think poetry is the only way out. And your book is a very, very interesting intervention at this point, the translation.
Just a second. Everyone, my new book is going to be out on the 10th of February. I normally don't make these announcements, but Chinki is someone who is engaged with my work without knowing how, without knowing me as a person, without hanging out with me. So I want to give her the pleasure of, not just being the female editor, but also to release my book. So just have one copy for her, but yeah, Chinki's, yeah.
this is the book, and I also feel that you should buy this book and her first book, The Gypsy Goddess. Very, very interesting. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks to all of you for coming and staying so long with us. Thank you.